Welcome back to the Mind Mountain podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the mental performance side of mountain biking with interesting guests from across our sport so that you guys, the listener, can pick up tools, tips, and tactics to help you become a better rider and have more fun out on the trails more often. Today on the podcast, we've got Rich MacLennan. Rich is one of the lead brains behind the SportSense remote coaching app and host of the SportSense podcast, where you may recognize him from. Rich has a broad and varied background across a variety of sports, including representing Canada in speed skating before moving into coaching and tech/marketing roles in mountain biking. With a deep understanding of both the technical and the mental side of the sport, he brings a practical, results-focused approach to his riding and his work. We're going to dive into his experience and explore how riders can harness a growth mindset to continue to progress on the bike, even as an adult or as someone who feels like mountain biking has not been their primary sport that they picked up earlier in life. Rich, with no further ado, it's great to have you here on the podcast.
Excited to be here, man. It's going to be fun.
It is. For those that haven't seen it, we actually did another podcast a few weeks ago on the SportSense podcast. You were interviewing me. And I got fired up, kind of getting to know you a bit, chatting to you about some of your background and some of your ideas. I wanted to ask you some more questions. So I thought, what better opportunity than to have you here on my podcast. So starting off here, you've just got back from a trip to Japan. I was just saying how jealous I am. Looked like you had some awesome snow. Firstly, how was that?
Japan was awesome. It was a trip. We'd been kind of thinking about going to Japan, I think, for probably the last decade after just watching people go there, the snow being amazing. And I'm a big skier. That's definitely like my first sort of hobby and sort of passion. And so planning this trip with my fiance and a couple of other friends, and we actually went to, we first flew into Tokyo, it was Sapporo, picked up some RVs. So we had 2 RVs and we were like a little skeptical. We're like, these gonna be too cold, or like, what's this gonna be like? Turns out that was a fantastic way to just chase the snow kind of everywhere. And we just basically like set up shop maybe 10 minutes away from the ski hill, and then, where the snow was gonna be the best. And then we would drive up in the morning and then just take advantage of the insane conditions that happen in Japan in January. So it was a fantastic trip. Bit of a disconnect. I'm still with SportSense. I'm still kind of like working sort of full time. I love what we're doing there, and also doing some of the video editing stuff. I was even editing our podcast, and I was there just to get it out. But yeah, so it was a nice kind of bit of a disconnect. And Japan as a culture too, just going there is just such a fantastic place to just walk around, and the people are so nice. The food is incredible. I'm not sure if you're a big sushi guy, Jake, but obviously the sushi's great, the ramen's great. And so really enjoyed the food and everything like that. I'd actually been to Japan on 3 other occasions, but I've never skied. So this was my first time. I kept going, and I was always like, never actually skiing. And I just like, no, the snow was amazing. And I was there as an athlete before, as a speed skater. But going to finally ski was like, that was the true kind of the crown jewel of like what I wanted to go to Japan for. So yeah, it was fantastic. And now we're back, and lack of snow here, but I think it kind of got my fill while we were across.
It certainly looked like it from the clips I seen online. And I'm curious, was that like the deepest powder you've ever skied? And was it like a different kind of snow than what you're used to?
So, I mean, the last couple of years being around Whistler, I mean, we've been spoiled with conditions for sure, because my job has been fairly flexible. And so I've been able to ski kind of midweek, whenever it's good. And we would typically only go out like the spoiled by the idea that like we had a season's pass and you could just like pop up if the snow seemed pretty decent. And, you get the odd pow day. I think in the last couple of years, we had like, 20 some odd pow days kind of thing. But I've had, a couple other times and this is like a recency bias thing with the Japan trip, where I'm like, it was probably the deepest snow I've ever skied, but I have had a couple other times back in Alberta, specifically kind of in the Fernie and Castle Mountain area, if anyone's familiar with that area, where I've, had pow just like coming over my head. But that snow was for sure, this time in Japan was sensationally deep. Okay, so I'll go into a little bit of the details. I don't know how much people have powder on this podcast, but like I'll talk a little bit about like how good it actually was. It was falling light the entire time. and it was pretty much bottomless when we got there, right? So there was a couple of days where it was snowing and these resorts were kind of shut down in some places. Like Tororo was the resort that we were sticking around. It was actually shut down for like 3 days because they have to groom under the lifts in order to make sure that there's not so much snow that accumulates that the lifts get stuck, right? So it gets closed if it snows too much. So we're literally there, and some of the turns that I took were like, I've never felt my skis do that, right? Like it was, you take a turn and you're like, that was truly bottomless and the powder was light and that kind of thing. So that was the first day. And then the second day it was snowing throughout the day. There was this accumulation happening, probably about 1.5 feet of accumulation. It wasn't really snowing super heavy or anything. So it was super, super light. And that wasn't even really doing anything. And so there's this one video I have of myself where I'm skiing in this already bottomless powder. And then we have this accumulation of about 1.5 feet. And that 1.5 feet wasn't doing anything other than making anyone watching that video incredibly jealous, because it was just coming over like it's like full white room as they're taking turns, right? So it was everything underneath, but it was like the perfect conditions to make it look as deep as possible and for me to be under as much snow. And there's 2 other videos that I took, or 2 other times I was trying to ski on these pitches where I just stopped because it was so deep. And I didn't post those ones, but it was literally like that situation, super rare situation, obviously, where you're like kind of skiing down and then like the snow's like up to your chest and you're just like, I can't move. And you just kind of like shuffle out of the way. So yeah, that's
so
it.
wild.
There's the dive into like, it was probably the deepest snow I've ever skied. But at some point, you're bottomless and you're just kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really get much better than that.
Was there any intentional kind of mindset or technique shifts you had to make to adjust to those conditions?
Oh man. So getting into it, it's like, I think with skiing, and while I was an athlete, there's this idea of capitalizing on performance. Like you've done the work and then you want to like really perform. And so how do you get into the right mindset? And so what I brought to skiing and what I really loved about skiing when I first started to get into it as my sort of first passion and my hobby when I was in my like middle 20s, like early 20s, is I would go and ski and try to tick off like really big lines, like couloirs and like big sort of alpine ascents. Often these were ice climbs or like low angle ice climbs that I would then ski. So there's actually a little more context to that. There's this book called The 50 Classic Ski Descents of the Rockies, and it's like all over North America. And I was trying to tick off as many of those as I could. And so what it would take though is when you get to the top of these things is you need to be in 100% like, I'm going to ski this thing and there's no way I'm going to fall because it is a no fall zone. So there's this consequence level, right? Of like the consequence is the most consequence, in that like if things could go as bad as they possibly could and you might end up dying if you fall. So it's you want to make sure you're in the right mindset. And so this is the thing I took from being an athlete to then being a skier was I was like, what are the cues? What are the things that I was going to think about? And so staying at the top of a run, I always do a little, like I always had this little, like they kind of like activate the muscles that I thought were going to be so I do a little twist and I go, and I big inhale, exhale. And it's like, back when I was an athlete, the key was you've done the work. So I was always like, you've done the work. So it's kind of just reassuring that like, just go out there and, do your thing. And so it just, that's kind of evolved over the years. I don't always say the same thing, but in the case of skiing, I would go, all right, let's make it count, or, something like that. Like I feel like it's make it count kind of a thing that bubbles up a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And so when you're skiing the best conditions of your life, you're going, I don't want to mess this up. You're like, I want this to be as fun as possible. I want to, quote unquote, show my best skiing and like have the most fun. And everyone in their mind has that idea of, I think the you kind of looking like a professional, like, going through like the most incredible conditions, the best powder run of your life. And so I do take it. It's funny that you asked this question because I do take it very seriously, even though it is just a completely fun pursuit. I stand at the top of a line. I say, this is my line. I commit to it. I lock in and I go just like, this is going to be I got to make this one count. And, the couple of technical cues that I might have and, in deep snow, it's kind of just, it's more of a rhythm thing rather than like a technical cue thing. Cause there's So it's more of a rhythm thing, and it's like just commit to it and like do the thing.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's the one thing that I have kind of brought from being an athlete to then now skiing and like making things count. And I think really trying to perform in those situations is important, even though it's fun. You know, it's like what's the point if you're not trying to do your best out there? I guess it's,
And I
and I
mean,
think that gives you more, like you're able to squeeze more out of the situation. You're able to like have a better time.
I love that. Yeah. I think that, like, even though it's fun, we still want to perform. Oftentimes the performance equals the fun, doesn't it? I think a lot of people listening to this podcast aren't necessarily professional athletes, but they're still interested in increasing their performance.
Yeah.
Because the better they're able to ski, or the better they're able to ride, in this case, the more terrain they're able to ride and the more fun they're able to have on that terrain because they're more proficient. So
Yeah.
it's cool, isn't it? Thinking about that crossover of performance and fun. And I love that you mentioned rhythm there in terms of your cues. It's something I've noticed as well over the years as I've become more proficient in certain skill sets or certain, say, maneuvers on certain types of terrain. Oftentimes my cues go from being really like skill based, as in like press the bike here, push it there, and
Yeah.
into more of a feeling. And I'll tap into that feeling at the top of the run before I drop in, or the rhythm, as you said.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling for that skill happening rather than really consciously thinking about the words of how to do it.
Right.
So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think too that what I've done for a lot of my life is I've internalized these sort of ideas of whatever have this ability to, or like not ability, but because I've done it so much when I was a speed skater, when I was a skier, all this kind of stuff, it's internalizing these sort of like things that are like, this is what you should do, and like, this is how you should feel, and like having a feeling uh, that is like specific to how I feel that thing. And I'll go back, like I'll use a speed skating analogy really quick. And it's like I almost simplified it as much as possible. One of the cues that we use is just down. So you're trying to, you're pushing with your skate, and it's a very complex motion. Speed skating is a very technical sport. But if you think about down, it's generally going to put your push in the right direction if you have all of the basics, if you have all of the things that are required to then make the push happen. And the less you're thinking about, the more you can increase your frequency. And like, then you're thinking about like, the corner entry and the cadence and like, that sort of stuff. So really just like internalizing, like, what's that one specific cue or what's the one specific feeling? And then you can really remember that feeling over and over. That's the idea of, for me, when it's a physical pursuit or like something that's performative, like physically, that's the idea of doing the work. It's like, do all of these things, see what works for you, take that idea and like internalize it, have that feeling, remember the feeling, and then apply that on the trail, in powder or on the ice.
It's a fascinating process, isn't it? There's so much background or so much foundation that goes into a skill set.
Yeah.
And then get into a place where you can trigger that entire complex motor movement from just one word or one feeling.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool when you get to the end of that process and it's all just happening.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no better feeling, I think, than when it's just happening, right? There's a couple of times, in my, I found like when I was skiing these big lines, and so so I was trying to take off all these big lines. I was doing a lot of like, like I said, alpine ascents, ice climbing type ski down. And I actually was doing this. It was part of a project I was doing for the university. I was measuring the 11,000 plus foot peaks in the Rockies. And I thought, why not have a little bit of fun with measuring these mountains and actually ski these lines? And so it was crazy summer job. It was like, kind of like, the best time to go up these things is in the summer. But it's like being in the moment there, with the consequences being as high as they were. Like, there are definitely a few lines that you ski where it's like you're up there and it's fun for sure, but it's like, things could go quite wrong. And you just want to be like as in the moment as possible, as turn to turn as possible. And you want to have the feeling of like, I have my edges. And then it's like on to the next turn, and you're committing. And it's, this thing about like gravity sports, right? It's like with a lot of other sports, we call it like running or whatever, it's swimming, you're pushing against something. And then you take a look at these gravity sports, skiing, mountain biking, and you're kind of letting go, right? To go. And so I always found that a little bit interesting as well, where it's like you're committing to something and you're committing to knowing that gravity is going to be taking you down this thing. And then you're also committing to like, I have the ability to do the next thing I'm saying I'm going to do. And yeah, it's full commitments, having those cues, having that internal kind of idea of uh, how you're going to go down something, how you're going to feel, and like being confident in your abilities, especially because you've done the work or whatever it is. That's always been like really core to how I've been able to execute these things. And yeah, it's been I think a lot of it's when you're in that state of flow, it's definitely like that's when it feels the best.
It's an addictive feeling, isn't it? I'm curious, you've got this broad background in a whole bunch of different sports. I think you mentioned that you've played a bunch of soccer or football as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where did mountain biking first become a thing for you? How did that come into your life?
So back when I was, so I'm from the middle of Canada, Ontario originally, and I have part of my family is based out in Vancouver. And we always used to do these family trips once or twice a summer. We'd come out to Vancouver and then we'd drive up actually to Whistler. It was always in the summer. So I never really skied Whistler or anything. I just started actually mountain biking Whistler. I went on a couple of times. Remember the first time in mountain bikes at the Whistler Bike Park, I was 10 years old. And I went down, I did a couple of runs. It was actually with a guide. My dad was like, you can go up there, but I'm not gonna let you go by yourself. You're gonna go with the guide. I remember going down and being like, this is the most fun thing I've ever done in my entire life. I remember saying this as a kid. I was 10 years old. I was like, if I could do this for the rest of my life, I would be so happy and this would be so fun. So that was my first enjoyment of mountain biking. I'd been to Whistler and like so it was probably 10, and then we kept coming back a couple of years. We always tried to get out and mountain bike. Back in Ontario, we do have some cross country mountain biking. It's okay. It's like, where I lived in Sault Ste. Marie, it was all right mountain biking, and the cross country. It was good to get out. When I started taking speed skating a little more seriously when I was 15, 16, I had to sort of like dial back mountain biking a little bit, mostly because of the requests of people that were saying that were sort of mentoring me, or my coaches and stuff like that. We don't want you to get injured, is what they would. We don't want you to get injured. Like, preserve your health and like make sure you don't break anything. Keep your career and like healthy. And basically, so it was more cross country biking at that point, whereas a cross training thing where mountain biking would be like, build up the aerobic base, and we would do that through the entire summer. I'd also do some road biking as well. And then so I really like kind of step back, didn't do a lot of like downhill biking or like technical features or anything like that, even up through my early 20s. And then into my mid 20s, I sort of came back into it. And unfortunately, around this time, it was like, it was a speed skater. I wasn't making a ton of money, but I couldn't really afford like a decent bike. And so I would get out occasionally and I would rent bikes. And so we'd go down to Fernie, or we'd go to some other places just to like get some riding in. And I remember just thinking, I was like, man, I just have to get back on this. And I'm also a little bit mad at myself for not like keeping having mountain biking like through my entire career as an athlete. Because I'm not like I wouldn't say that I probably pushed it a little more back then. I don't really push it as much as like anymore. Like I feel like I'm just out there to have fun and like really ride and like improve my skills and not get hurt. But then yeah, so it's developed into this like when I finished with my athletic career and I started to get back into, let's call it real life. Skiing was the winter thing, mountain biking is the summer thing. And then when we moved out to Squamish, it's like you can basically mountain bike like 11 months a year. And my wife, or my fiance, she's super into mountain biking as well. And this is just kind of something that we would do together. And then we really built a nice friend group around like, mountain biking and getting out on the trails around Squamish. And just really, I found a ton of joy in just like always improving, or always trying to think about one or two things and getting better on the trails, right? But one of the big things I really noticed about mountain biking, and like just kind of jumping to this, honestly, is the progression, or the way that you have to progress. And maybe it's because I'm a little bit older, but the way that you have to progress is so calculated and so slow. And I've never had a sport where like the incremental progression can be as slow as mountain biking. Like you can go on, like let's talk, weightlifting or something. It's like if I'm trying to incrementally progress in like, a bicep curl, probably week to week, you're going to be able to jump up like a decent percentage, right? Like, or at least you're going to have like this like early progression, like right out of the gates. In mountain biking, it's like if you try to push it too hard, there's so much consequence on the other side. Like no fall is ever a good fall. And so these little tiny progressions, it's like I'm going to hit this feature that I know I'm going to hit, and you have to be 100% confident in it. But then I'm going to hit this feature that is kind of like a feature that I know I've hit, and maybe a little bit bigger. And I found that's how you're like making these progressions. Obviously, that adds up over time. But this is like my experience, I guess, is like progressing as an adult in mountain biking. But then again, this is kind of the reason that I love it. It's like you can. I'm sort of feel like I'm in the middle of the community of like how let's call it like high average of how good of mountain biking I am. And maybe just because of the people we surround ourselves with, like, in Squamish and Sea to Sky, incredibly talented riders. And it's like you're always kind of able to improve a little bit more. And that improvement is really what brings a lot of joy, even if it's small increments along the way.
Definitely. Yeah, I love this perspective. And this is one of the topics I was dying to get into on this podcast, because I think a lot of our listeners will relate. That kind of perspective of someone who identifies mountain bike as perhaps a second sport, or maybe it's your first sport now, but it's been picked up or you've got back into it later in life.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk here a bit more about what that journey's been like for you. And perhaps we can start by you saying, we swim in a pool of big fish here in BC. There's a lot of really, really proficient riders, and even just the riders that are casual mums, casual dads out there will often be kind of sleepers where they'll come and win the Squamish Enduro or something like that. So how do you feel when you're out there riding in the community and you're perhaps feeling like you're somewhere in the middle of that? Does that ever play into your mindset out there of like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm fast enough or good enough to join this group, or maybe I'm too fast for the other group? How does that factor in for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I think like I was lucky enough to be an athlete where I feel like I got a lot of my competitive spirit out, if that makes sense. Like I had the opportunity to be very competitive and compete against other people, and like it still comes out on a day to day. And picking up mountain biking as a second sport really, or like a third sport, really feels like I'm just doing it for fun. Like it's not the thing that necessarily defines me. It's not the thing that I have to be like the best at, right? And so getting out and sort of being in the middle kind of makes me feel like I'm like, oh, I wish I was better at this thing sometimes. But it definitely, it definitely is definitely this like treadmill of progression, and it's almost like it's a good sort of metaphor for life, I think. And so when I was younger, I think a lot of things that I did as an athlete, and the reason I ended up going to let's call it even the path of least resistance, to go where I felt like I was going to be most successful. And that's kind of where you're pushed, right? Like as a kid, everyone's like, oh, you're good at this, go do this thing. And you don't have a lot of like failure or setbacks, I think. And like when I entered, let's call it again, regular life, and started working or like, applying for jobs, and like life is really this like try a lot of stuff, and then whatever does work, you're going to figure this out on your own. Whatever does end up working, kind of go in that direction. You can't be afraid to fail, right? You can't be afraid to fail, because like then you'll never figure out what you're good at. You have to keep working at like, there's so many things you have to try. And it's this surface area of like, try all these things and then see what you're good at. And I think mountain biking is like, in a similar way, it's like, you're going to try so many things and you're not going to be good at them at the start. And you're going to watch somebody and just say, I can do that. That looks easy. And then you're not going to be able to do it. And so it's this reminder with mountain biking. It's this reminder that there's always something that you can improve, and like being able to look at someone and say, hey, look how much better this one rider is from me. And like how many steps are in between that to me is like that's so much progression. That's so much change that you can make. That's going to make you happy, because every time you get a little bit better, you're going to feel really good about yourself. And I even had this, my first sort of real serious coaching session was, it would have been probably 2 years ago now, but it's a real serious coaching session. I was with Ross Dunlop and Paul Howard. And it was kind of more of like just like a fun day, and like we were out like doing some stuff, and they decided, and I was like, you mind giving me a couple of tips? Like just give me a few of them. And they gave me these, they're like, hey, try this, like, shift your weight this way, like do this thing. Here's what you should do in the corners, blah, blah. They gave me a couple of tips. The next time I went out riding, I was like, I was thinking about these things that they told me. And I was like, I felt a little more proficient on the bike. And it was the most fun I had had riding in the last, I don't know, like I had been biking again, like maybe 6-7 years, like a little more seriously again. And after like 6 years, getting that little bit of feedback and then being like, wow, like this is such a difference. It wasn't like a new fork. It wasn't like a new bike. It wasn't like a new nothing. It was literally just a little shift in like what I was doing, like a couple of cues, whatever it was. And I felt so much better. I was blown away, honestly, and I had so much fun. And it completely changed trails for me too. It was I went on that road. It was like Rupert and Squamish. I've ridden that trail like a million times because we live right near it. But it made me think about the trail in a different way. So I like ridden it one way before, and then now I was out there again, and I go, oh, I'm gonna like ride it a different way. And it just, I think, to kind of bring it back to your question here, it's like there's so much possibility out there for like what you can do and how good you can get, and like the trails you can ride and how you can ride them and the things you can change. And I love the idea of that sort of endless universe of possibilities to just kind of like chase down and keep trying to progress with in mountain biking. And so that's the way I approach it. I know for some people, I think they really want to be the best at something, right? They want like, I want to be the best, but I think that there's so much value and joy in the progress and the small little incremental improvements that you can make.
I love that frame. I love that way of looking at it, man. Because like you say, some people can get caught up in like, oh, I'm not progressing fast enough, or I want to, want to be able to do this now.
Yeah. Well, I have one other thing. Sorry to cut you off, but one other thing too that I think is definitely for mountain biking. For me, it's like because I'm in the middle of the pack, you realize how many people are on either side. And it kind of gives you that like, oh well, it doesn't matter how much better I get because I'm not like winning World Cups and I'm not whatever here. It's like it doesn't. I don't actually have to measure myself against anyone else, and then you're able to just measure yourself against yourself, which is super liberating in my opinion. Where it's like just if you make progress in that day. It's like, or you make progress in like whatever it is. It could be in work and it could be in whatever. It's like, if you make a little bit of progress compared to yourself, that's exciting. That's great. Like you're going to feel good about yourself at the end of the day. And so I do this in work. I do this in mountain biking, and I think it's a great way to really love what you do.
Totally. Yeah. Such a great way of looking at things because it can be looked at as a negative that like, once we go through that initial beginner stage where there's lots of low-hanging fruit and we do often progress really quickly because there's not as much risk or consequence, getting to that intermediate advanced stage of our mountain biking, and typically the growth or the progression does kind of flatten off a little bit because all of a sudden it's like, hey, I want to keep getting better, but I don't want to get hurt. So oftentimes a lot of mountain bikers there are like wanting to continue that really fast progression, but it's not always possible unless they're willing to take on a shit ton of risk and perhaps have a bit more of a destructive progression curve where they're getting hurt along the way. So I love the way you simply reframe that there and you say, hey, this is awesome because of these smaller chunks and because it is a longer process. That means I get to keep having these small little wins for longer, and it's going to be a fun time for longer. So
yeah,
that's awesome. I also love that you talked about, getting your first coaching session with Ross and with Paul after having ridden for years and years as an adult already. And just how those few little things, those few little cues completely transformed the way you looked at trails that were already really familiar to you. It's such a fun process to go through, isn't it? It's one of the things I love most as a coach is just seeing people absolutely like lit up after changing just these tiny little aspects in their riding. So it can definitely be a cool performance upgrade. Oftentimes we talk about like, if our bike's already completely like upgraded, we've got a nice modern mountain bike, it's in good working order, rather than buy the new fork that Fox just came out with, perhaps there's more bang for your buck in doing a coaching session or investing in a smart coach or something else instead. I can hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about the growth and kind of that performance psychology. I'm curious, where did that come from for you?
So it definitely was the first sort of growth opportunity I really had was being a speed skater. And I was on the national team for about a decade. I competed at 40 different World Cups, 4 different World Championships. I have 2 World Championship medals from World Juniors. And it was this looking at all of the skaters and what they were doing, and we were all doing a similar program. We were all doing something similar, like within Canada, because we'd all train at the same center. We train as a team and then we compete as individuals. And what really separated individuals is, we're all doing literally exactly the same thing. What separated individuals was their mindset, and who could be, in a sort of better mindset, I guess, like when they were racing, or like even when they were training in some days. And so this growth mindset of mine sort of came from there. When I started working, the first job I had, I was working with Red Bull, actually. So I came out of school, was doing a couple of things for the university, and started working at Red Bull. And I would say in like the working world, things didn't necessarily come as, let's call it, as easy or as like quickly as they did when I was an athlete. Because when you're an athlete, you're able to, I think, really protect yourself and like be like, okay, like I'm, in this bubble of like, and there's like less kind of things getting in your way, and there's, it's easy, it's easy to progress. And of course you have setbacks, but so when I came out in the world of work, I started working at Red Bull, and it was kind of this I didn't know what I didn't know thing. And I realized that into the second, third year of this job here, where I'm like, oh wait, like there's just this endless sort of opportunity to continue growing and learning. And it doesn't matter what you do, there's pretty much always going to be someone who is the best at it or better than you. And you can keep looking. So the growth mindset really came from, and then you look inward and you go, how can I get better at what I'm doing? And what started to matter at that point in my life, I was like 27, 28, is I wanted to be good at with my career. I wanted to be good at what I was doing. And so it was just, I started in marketing, basically. My background, actually, I got a degree in kinesiology, is like biomechanics, movement, and I have a minor in computer science. And so I always wanted to like meld the two together. That was like the human movement. I was always interested in this like human movement and performance, like for performance movement, and then also the performance psychology side of things. But then the computer science side was like melding it together. Like imagine like Garmin, or like something like, a company like that, where it's like using biometrics, that sort of thing. Being a supporting role in the in a physical movement is kind of how I thought of it. But then, so what I realized, though, is the world's a really, really big place, and this growth mindset, I obviously came to the conclusion that this was really important, that you needed to have a growth mindset. So I started to put the things in place that made it possible for me to like, how can I keep growing? And like, I want this ever expanding like universe of possibilities for myself that I keep learning like every single day. And so did a couple of other businesses and like kept trying to learn. And with that comes a lot of setbacks. These other businesses didn't necessarily work out, but come a lot of setbacks. But you just realize that like you have to keep growing and moving forward and trying to get better. And so taking this originally what was an athletic pursuit idea and applying it to being more of a mental worker, or like a mental athlete, is kind of the way that I put it. Not that I feel like I'm a mental athlete, like a chess player or something like that, but just that it's like applying these optimized sort of principles to how can you use them in your day to day, how can you use them within work, and then work on something that you really love. And I've always pursued my passions, really. There was a couple of times that I considered like getting a job for the sake of getting a job and trying to make a bunch of money and like whatever it was. But I ended up making the sacrifice where I just pursued my passions for a really long time. And now we're in a situation where I'm working for SportSense, like, we're doing the podcast, like I'm doing some writing for GSMBC, and it's like, I'm truly doing what I like pursued. And now I can get to continue to grow in this role. I can get to continue to learn. And I just think that growth mindset is so important. It was something that was like kind of driven into me for like years and years as an athlete too, just because there's these incremental improvements. You can look at the graph of like how they stack up and like how you get to, being an Olympic champion or whatever, or like, or who is successful. So I think that the growth mindset, it's also gets you excited for every single day, I think. you kind of start a day and you're like, if you have nothing to really look forward to and nothing to kind of like aspire to in that day, then like, what's the point of having a day? What's the point of waking up? So I think that like, just waking up every morning and being like actually excited and like really stoked to go out and do something you really enjoy and learn about new things. I think that's really the whole point.
Yeah, man. I want to say congratulations. Like 10-year-old Rich must be proud, being at the Whistler Bike Park and saying, I wish I could do this every day.
And 10-year-old Rich would be like, dude, I can't believe this is your job right now. Like I can't believe this is what you're doing.
Same with 10-year-old Jake. He didn't know this was a job.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
People
that's a
that
whole other
idea
rabbit
of,
hole.
of following your passion and just relentlessly looking to improve yourself. It's one of the things I love most about performance psychology and growth mindset as well, and is the sense that we can improve ourselves and we can get better off the bike. So in work, in our relationships, in our family life, and whatever it is, but that's also going to make us a better operator on the bike as well. And then same with our mountain biking. It's like if we think we don't have time to go mountain biking because we're too busy with work, well, it's like, well, what if that mountain bike ride could actually make you better at doing your job when you come back
Yeah.
into the office or whatever you do for work?
Well, I do have a pretty interesting kind of little N of one experiment I can tell you about. That is exactly what you're talking about, but it's for when I was an athlete. So when I was speed skating, competing internationally from basically 2010 till 2014, I was on the World Cup circuit, and I did a couple of world championships within there. My best years, I did this two things. My best years though were when I was very busy outside of speed skating. So I was speed skating and I was performing and I was like showing up on the ice. I was like getting the job done and like doing the thing. And then outside of that, I was taking full-time university. I was completely focused on the university thing. And there was this like balance, right? And so I think what you're saying here too with like mountain biking and in life, it's like you can work on mountain biking and that's a good focus. Like continue and like you have the growth mindset there. And that can like take you out of the regular day to day and give you more energy potentially. Like this is how I saw it at least. And maybe it's just that I kind of wanted more stuff going on and like, feel like I was doing more and I like really wanted to be like, active and like do like productive and that sort of thing. And that made me feel good. And maybe that was what made me good as a speed skater. But I also think that there's this like, and I saw it with some other athletes too, where they could pull themselves out of the like training mentality because it can get boring, it can get monotonous, and it can be a bit of a grind sometimes. But then you go do something else, and that's like the fresh new thing. It's like, oh, it gives you energy. So I think that having that balance is super important.
Definitely. Yeah. I think if we do too much of any one thing, it kind of drains our energy, doesn't it? And it's like,
Yeah.
even if we've still got loads of work to do,
Yeah.
we'll actually better do that work faster or in less time later on if we go out for a mountain bike ride or do something that lights us up and kind of restocks that energy.
Exactly.
It's sometimes tough to do because you might feel really tired and really drained from perhaps having lots of other stuff going on in your life, maybe lots of mental load, but it's like actually going out and doing what can be quite an intense activity can be
Yeah.
exactly what we need to kind of reignite that flame and that passion for life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually stole something from your LinkedIn when I was stalking you online as a
Yeah.
little quote, I think in relation more so to your work, but I love to win, I love to move fast, and I double down on what works.
Yeah.
So I'm sure this translates to your mountain biking and your sports as well. So my question for you is, what do you do when you lose, you fail, you mess up? What do you do from a mindset perspective? Is there anything you say or any kind of mental reset you'll do that?
Well, that's a good question. To acknowledge first that being on my LinkedIn, I put that on fairly recently because I think I sort of don't necessarily disagree, but I dislike that sort of corporate mentality of like, here's what your profile should look like, here's what it should say, and like, here's the template. And like, you'd literally throw it into some AI and chat GPT, whatever. Here's all my skills, and then it will just like hump on a resume for you. And like, here's your LinkedIn bio and that sort of thing. I wanted there to be like more passion in my bio. Like this is maybe where someone's going to see me for the first time. And like, I also just kind of did it for me. I was like, I'm just going to put that in there. Like, this is me. I want to be myself. Like put that out there, like more passion. Like that sort of doubling down on what works, whatever. And this truly came out of, like, to answer your question now, this truly came out of me failing a lot. It's like it's like you build up this callus of being of failing, of just like over time, it's like this, it's almost a bit of a numbers game. Or it is a numbers game. You get out and you try things, and you just have to expect that things aren't going to work. And I'm not saying that in like I'm saying that as an optimist. I'm saying that very much as a get out there, try things that are going to work. And even if it doesn't work, it might work the next time. And I'm always kind of thinking that I'm always trying to be an optimist in that sense. And I think too, it's really tough, like rejection and things not working out the way you want them to. And it is very, very tough. And I think when I was younger, I had a really difficult time dealing with a lot of this stuff. And this, you can get into the personal side of things. It was like I had a tough time dealing with rejection, and maybe you don't fit into a friend group when you're in high school, or like maybe you don't, you didn't like achieve that goal, or you didn't get the best grades on that test that you wanted, or and when I failed at something, I wanted to protect myself and say, like when I was younger, I wanted to protect myself and say, I just don't need to do that thing. I'm just going to do the stuff that I'm good at. Whereas now, with maturity and with growing, and I think getting a little bit older, let's say it's kind of that, like, you start to realize that you just want to increase the surface area of the tries that you have. And then you're going to figure out what works and what you're good at, and then sort of double down on those things. Really what I tell myself when things don't work out is I reassure myself that I've done the work. I have, I know the knowledge that I have, and I know myself. And then I say, look, maybe next time, or like, at least this was a learning experience to then potentially do better in the next one. And so I had this amazing mentor. He was actually at the last company that I worked for. He started his own small business, but I remember I failed a couple of times at this company, and he goes, well, like, that's good. Now we have the information that doesn't work. so it was like a failure in the moment, but he was able to put it into the perspective that this is information now.
Mhm.
We know not to do these things, or we know not to do a couple of these things within the whole scheme of what you were doing, and move forward. So it's not a failure, it's a learning moment, and that's how you can move forward.
I love that. Thanks for diving into that, because I do feel like it is a conscious choice, isn't it? And it kind of reminds me of the quote, like, in life, we either win and we learn, or we lose. And it is our choice, and it's our frame of how we're looking at particular events or things that have happened, whether that's going to be a loss for us, or whether that's going to be a learning moment. And I think when we do get stuck, and this can happen unconsciously as well, we don't need to beat ourselves up if this is something that does happen for us. But when we are perhaps looking at all the negatives or all the things that aren't happening in our mountain biking, that clouds out any of the wins that may actually be there. We can't see them because we've got such a focus on what's not happening. Whereas when we make that small shift and we say, okay, yeah, this ride wasn't ideal. I've been sliding out all over the place, or I've got lost, or I've crashed, or whatever's happened. It's not ideal. What can I learn from this? How can my next ride be better? Or how am I going to change my process next time? What resources am I going to seek? All of a sudden, we might start opening our eyes up to, well, actually, these are all the things that aren't quite going that well. But because I'm now open to learning, well, my body position's still actually pretty good, and I didn't get hurt as much as I could have. And we start seeing some of those wins, right?
Exactly.
It fascinates me how just that little shift can completely change our trajectory as an athlete, or, like you say, in other areas of our life as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious with the whole world of diving into SportSense, and I just want to say that's super cool as well. It's not only brought in your passion of mountain biking into your day job, you've also got that kinesiology of that. I love that.
Turn the hat around.
We're all business now. It's tied together this pattern of, like, how does the body move, but also brought in that tech background or the computer science background. So I'm curious for you, in your own mountain biking, now having this new tool that you've helped develop, how important has visual feedback been in your mountain biking journey, and how has your mountain biking changed since having this tool we call SportSense on your iPhone?
Well, the visual feedback piece is, I think, one of the most important things I've ever used in any sort of like physical pursuit, movement, that kind of thing, like being an athlete. there's so many times when you think you're doing something that you're absolutely not. And so 2 days ago, we were at the pool, and I was like, I went and I tried a gainer off of a diving board. Okay, so I go and I do this, and I like do this gainer, and so I didn't know this, but my fiance is like taking a video of me, basically like doing this gainer off the thing. And she's like, and I was like, oh, what did I do? And she goes, oh, here you go. And it turns out I completely didn't do what I thought I did. I thought it was like, you know, I had all these cues. I was like, I'm gonna like, jump back, like come backwards and like drive my hips and then like tuck whatever. Turns out I just like whipped my head back and like barely spun. so, so I think that actually seeing what you're doing and then translating that into a feeling is like the most important thing you can do. So having the video feedback, I use SportSense. Like it's crazy how much we use it, and we started building this app out of just a bit of a passion of like, we want to be able to improve, and we want to build a great tool for people to improve and like, reduce admin and all this other stuff, but basically help take care of the business side of coaching. But it really was like I use it in so many scenarios now that I might not have before because we're doing this, and it's made people around me better at what they're doing because I'm able to show them, hey, here's what you actually did, and they go, oh wait, and then they make that slight little change. Or like even for myself, take a video of me like skiing and that, or like mountain biking, or how did I hit this line, and make the change there. It's just that like seeing that objective, this is actually what you did, is such a game changer. And I think, any coach these days will, I'm sure you'll agree, Jake, is like with video, it's like, that's one of the most important tools. It's a tool in the toolbox, but it is one of the most important tools, I think, to people seeing how they can progress and how to make changes.
It's cool thinking about how that technology has evolved over the years too. Hey, like I think when video first came about, it was more so like watching videos of other riders. So we watched like old VHS tapes of pro mountain bikers, and then being able to see what they were doing inspired us, or like implanted in our minds what was possible.
Yeah.
And then like with the event of everyone carrying around, like GoPros and iPhones, we're able to film each other really quickly and actually get that real-time feedback on the trails.
Right.
And I feel like this is like the next evolution, because we've got the videos on our iPhone in real time, but we're now able to connect with riders in different places, and also have this whole host of different tools that added just extra layers to the visual feedback and allow us to explain like some quite complex movements, motor movements and different learning patterns in really simple terms.
Yeah. And with coaching, when, let's go back to COVID hit, everybody went remote. And this is like huge benefit of like everybody go remote except for coaches. Like you guys, you still had to do the in-person thing. There wasn't really any good platforms to do stuff online. Sure, you could do like Zoom calls and whatever. And like, but these video analysis tools, it's like this sort of democratizes coaching. It makes it so you're not regionally locked to a specific area, and you can continue relationships with the people that you, as a coach, that you are training. And like, maybe they don't need a big long weekend session this time. Maybe they just need one little quick, like, man, I don't know what I'm messing up right now. Like my jumps feel off. Like I just feel off when I'm hitting jumps. Take a quick video, submit it. You can say, oh, well, you're doing this. And then they go, oh, it's that quick little feedback. And then they can like continue on. But that relationship gets continued through like the way that we connect, like in so many ways today, where it's like you call your parents or whatever. We're not always seeing these people, but we're like just continuing that relationship through the weeks. And then the next time that they go, now I'm ready for a big session, I'm going to come out. I think that's really where we want to like bridge the gap a little bit with SportSense, is making coaching more accessible and also affordable for people who can't necessarily get to these locations. You can't always be in Whistler. You can't always be in Tasmania. You can't always be like in the places where the best coaches are. But we also want exactly. we wanted to make it so, and we want to make it so that coaches can like yourself, like exceptional coaches who have a ton of knowledge, who are very skilled at what they do, can reach people anywhere in the world. And so that's our vision. That's the direction we're going with SportSense. And it's definitely well on its way.
I love it. And the other thing that really lights me up too is thinking about the intersection of how this technology can then play into the mental side.
Yeah.
I find for myself and for a lot of my students, it can keep us motivated as well. So like you say, you might do a session with a coach and then head home to your home trails. And
Yeah.
then what could have ended in kind of frustration or a bit of avoidance before of like, yeah, my jumping's just not working. So maybe we don't hit that jump again because it's big and scary and it felt awful last time. Now all of a sudden we've got the tools to stay in that like approach mentality or growth mindset of like, well, what could I do different? We can ask for help, we can get that help, and then we can keep progressing. So it's a
Yeah.
tool to use to keep us on that path of incremental progression and perhaps help us get through some of the slumps we might have stayed stuck in for months or seasons before.
So you touch on this really interesting topic or this idea that I've been thinking about for the last couple of weeks here. And it's how do the communities that we're involved in or like the groups of people that we associate with most frequently affect how we like, perform with a sport or like act on a day-to-day basis. And so lately I explored this in the context of Red Bull Hardline. And so with Red Bull Hardline, the idea of the race was to create the hardest race, and it was just a you know a gold medal for finishing this thing, right? And what I actually wrote an article about was Gracie Hemstreet. So she was the first female in 2024 to complete a hardline run, and what I compared it to was what is called the Bannister effect. And so, are you familiar with Roger Bannister? Who's the Okay, so he was the first person to run under 4 minutes in the mile.
That's right.
So the Bannister effect is one person breaks a barrier and then all of a sudden everybody else does it. And so for a couple of reasons, right? And there's obviously this tech and there's like there's tech and there's a number of other things that we don't really have control over, like the industries kind of control that. But there's two things that are really interesting. One is like these training methodologies, or what you could call like a ratcheting up of like we see a technique or something that's a training methodology that works, and now people start doing that. That's like the one piece, right? So he's the best, he does this thing, we're going to copy him, or we're going to at least start there when we're young and then get to that point. And then the other side is the psychology side. Before Roger Bannister broke 4 minutes, scientists or people believed that if you ran faster than 4 minutes, you would die. so it's like this breaking of the barrier. Your brain is going to protect you from running under 4 minutes. It's going to say, that's not possible. We can't do that. So in the context of Hardline and Gracie, originally there was a decade basically where no female had ridden the Red Bull Hardline course. And then Gracie comes out and she does it. All of a sudden, the industry changes. All the women are coming out. Louise Ferguson does Wales. I think it was last year she did it. But now it's actually starting to look like an actual field of people. So it's not just people getting down this line anymore. And year after year with Hardline, they keep building these jumps and these features that are the craziest things you've ever seen, but they become more routine every single year. You watch people go, and so it's the social identity theory. It's like, that's the norm. People lift up themselves and go, oh, well, a bunch of other people can do this. They make it look easy. I can probably do it. And so the community of mountain biking, and this is kind of more at a global scale with Hardline, the community of mountain biking, it's like, if you see other people doing those things, you will then go, okay, that is possible. I can potentially do it. Break that down into a smaller, like micro kind of version of it. And the community that you like call it, that you coach in, that you grow up with, or the group of people that you're typically coaching with. And I've observed this across like, different sports or different, because I've coached a number of sports. You see people that are amazing at skiing, because they all grew up together in Nelson, BC, and they're like unbelievable freeride skiers, and the terrain, it makes them like sort of better. But there's so many good skiers in that realm. And then there's also, like you look at running or whatever, it's like in Kenya, there's this like group of runners in this one specific region of Kenya who are like account for, it's like 100 of the marathon time is below like 2:10 or something like that. So you see these communities where these people are like exceptional at what they do. And I think that what this sort of connecting virtually within SportSense, or connecting virtually like with your communities, being in that community of like, Jake, you're a coach, and then you have your community of riders that they're all capable of doing these things, and like being within that group of people, you can then see that they're doing something like, oh, I saw them hit a jump like this, and so like maybe I can do that too. And so you start becoming more optimistic, and you start sort of normalizing those little bits of progression that you see from other people. And there's always going to be a range. And so I think that's a huge advantage now of being able to take these communities, be virtual, and sort of be online rather than just being only in person and being kind of like regionally locked. Because I mean, that is kind of the case for a lot of people.
Definitely. The community plays a huge element, hey? And it's something I've realized more and more over the years. Some of the writers in my programs that would get the best results, so to speak, or have the most fun, achieve their goals, achieve the progression they're seeking, were the ones that had a good community to go out and practice the skills with.
Yeah.
That's actually something we've put more and more focus on in recent years. And before that, I was always talking about, developing writers' confidence, developing their control, and making sure they're getting the consistency they need. But now we talk about this fourth C, which is the community.
Yeah.
And I love the example you brought up there of like Red Bull Hardline, and then the runner breaking the 4-minute mark there.
Yeah.
I feel like so often we can put in place these ceilings that are really just a construct. But if everyone believes them, or if we truly believe them, that's what becomes true.
Yeah.
I think the best riders out there, whether they're pro athletes or whether they're just casual riders that are having fun, I'll notice they're in a habit of not necessarily saying no to anything. Rather, they might say, not yet, not
Really?
today. Like, I can't see myself doing that anytime soon. But they never actually say like, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. They leave the door open. And I think it's really important because, like you say, sports like Red Bull Hardline, or even just mountain biking in general, and the difficulty of trails and how that keeps going up and up and up. It is a bit of an exponential curve for the riders who let it be. And quite often at the bottom of that curve, it might feel like you're doing the work and you're doing the coaching sessions and you're practicing and you're not necessarily seeing the results. But if you are taking like a well-rounded approach and working on all aspects of your performance, eventually it becomes a little bit like, say, compound interest in an investment.
Yeah.
It doesn't move very fast at the start, but all of a sudden after years of work and having a connected community and doing the work and getting inspired and getting stoked, all of a sudden we start seeing the return on that investment in terms of finding more and more flow in our riding, having more and more fun, or maybe it means, winning more and more races or doing bigger and bigger features. It's something I really love when you see a rider finally get to that stage where they've been doing the work for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then they're finally like seeing the results, having lots of fun.
Yeah. And what really helps too, I think, is when you have communities of like people who are similarly good to you, but like maybe even just a little bit better. Because if I went out and rode with like Asa Vermette right now, he'd be gone, and I'd be like, well, I can't do that. And so you need to be able to see where you're able to see yourself progressing to the level of these people that you're around, right? And what's really cool about mountain biking too is you have like so many different skills. And somebody might be better at jumps, they might be better at corners, they might be better at whatever. And people usually know that too. Like I have these conversations like with my friends who are like, oh yeah, I'm really down in my corners lately. I follow them around and I go, oh yeah, I'm learning a little bit because I'm doing exactly what they're doing, right? So yeah, being like at least in a like positioning yourself in a community or in a group that's similarly skilled, and then like is great. But I think, obviously you can't be like, oh, I'm going to go do what these pros are doing, because like it's just too far away. Like it's like I've said a bunch of times in this podcast, it's like there's these little incremental progressions that you have to make. But then to your point, after not seeing them for 3 years, it's a big leap. It looks like a leap, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. It kind of reminds me, there's a method called the Shamrock method of martial arts. And it says the martial artists, or the fighters, whatever we want to call them, that grow the fastest or become the best, they train with people who are their equals. And the idea is that they challenge each other, they inspire each other. So to put that in a mountain biking context, maybe that's one of your buddies that you're almost the same speed at, and maybe they're a little bit better at corners, but you're a little bit better at jumps, and you're always kind of racing each other in a fun way, challenging each other.
Right.
And you may also have someone who's, say, a couple of notches below you, and you become like a mentor to them. You start teaching them, and that's going to help you understand mountain biking and the skills on a deeper level and become a better rider yourself.
Yeah.
And then to your point, it's also really important we have those riders that are perhaps a notch or two above us, because they're the ones that are really going to inspire us and kind of show us the path and what's next. So that could be a coach, or it could just be a buddy that's been riding for a longer time. But I think that's really important. And I see that in the riders I work with as well. Those that have kind of all three of those, and that's the community aspect, are the ones that grow the fastest and have the most fun. So a little bit of food for thought. If you're perhaps riding just with people who are way faster than you and you maybe don't see them, apart from, at the tailgate when you get your bike off and then it's like, all right, goodbye, I'll see you at the bottom. Maybe there's space there to join a community, whether that be a riding group or a coaching group, or even remotely through an app like the SportSense. Join a community with riders that are closer to your level, so that you can maximize your growth.
Yeah, and I think too with SportSense, and where I see it going is because it's selectively social in a way. Like you can create a group on SportSense on the feeds, right? And sharing your riding just with the feed with the people that you want to. It's kind of like, I don't know, you probably have a couple of group chats on like Instagram where you just share like memes with your friends. It's kind of like that. Like where I'm just like sharing memes with my friends on Instagram, and like this is how I connect to these people. Like we chat here and there, but like mostly it's just a bunch of guys and like we're just sharing memes and like being silly. But in SportSense, it's like you have this feed and it's like you are riding, and if you had that, like, maybe you're not in the same place, but you're able to connect virtually there and say like, yo, check out what I did today. Look what I rode. That's, that feedback loop is what we're trying to get to, because then you can say like, oh, I rode something like that today. You don't all have to be in Smallish. You don't all have to be in, wherever it is. Like you can just kind of like share those experiences of riding and keep connected. And then keep it in one place too. Cause like in a lot of ways, like sometimes we have just like hundreds and hundreds of mountain biking videos on our phone, and it's mixed in with like photos of dinner and then like my parents' dog and like whatever else. And you want to like make sure that everything is kind of in one place and all your riding is in one place. And so that's one direction I see SportSense going. It's just like sharing and being part of the community with people and like staying in touch and yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely helping tick a lot of boxes, that's for sure. No one's laughing there. I'm definitely guilty of the mountain bike videos, mixed with the dinner photos and whatever else.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. This has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like I could keep talking for hours, but I respect your time here. As we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, looking ahead, what's one thing you're excited to see in the mountain bike industry over the next, say, decade?
Good question. Another idea that I've been really exploring, looking at, and comes from my background in sports, is I've coached running, track cycling, skiing, and speed skating. I'm coached all these sports, and now I'm just a sort of I mountain bike, and that's like one of my progression things. But the idea that I'm really excited about is that, or that I've been looking into, is there's like a sport like running or track and field or whatever is in a point where it's sort of matured and all of the techniques have been sort of discovered in a way. There's records that are around from like the 80s and the 90s. There's records that are around there's not a lot of progression happening. There's still progression, but it's like in the small little bits. I think with the mountain bike industry and like mountain bike racing as a whole and everything like that is like, we are still so new in this sport, and the techniques and the methods and the way that we do things are still really developing, and the progress amongst the whole mountain bike world is happening very quickly. And looking at like Loic versus Jackson, okay, so these are like between 5 years or so. For 5 years or so, Loic was like, everyone believed this is the best way to ride, and he's just blasting through all these features, and his body is quiet, so to say. It's like, it's quiet, and he's like, his movements, it's like he's just doing this like almost 85%, just like really, really solid. And then a guy like Jackson comes along, and he's one of the most active riders on the bike. And so it completely changes the worldview of like, how do you ride a bike down a hill the fastest? And everyone's trying to be like, look, and now it's like Jackson goes and does his thing. He's hitting all these micro transfers, and he's just so active and and he's smaller. They have different body types. And it's realizing that, like, first off, even the body type, we thought we had it figured out. Like, you want like a big, solid, like, boom, like go downhill, versus like now we have like a smaller rider who's way more active, like, lily padding around,
Mm.
seeing that he's had as much success as he has, like it's really cool just to see how quickly the sport is progressing and how things are changing. So I am just excited for um, the where the sport's going to go, and especially for this younger generation who's been on bikes for basically their entire lives, like but on good bikes, sorry, for their entire lives, where they've been on these like absolutely tuned to perfection, and this bike is essentially an extension of them. Like when they're riding, you see how competent they are in these things, and just to see where the sport goes and like how those sort of the methodologies change, and like how do people think about riding specific lines. And I'm just so excited for that as a whole. And I'll wrap it up with that. That's kind of what I'm really looking forward to.
That's a fantastic way to end this, man. Yeah, what an exciting time to be in the sport. And I love your excitement. I love your passion. I've picked up lots of little nuggets of wisdom from this conversation. I'm sure our listeners have as well. So yeah, thank you for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, dude. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you on the next one.